for the last 300,000 years of human evolution, we have never really known how to predict the future. For example, 3 years ago, no one could have imagined that COVID would lock the world. A year ago, no one could have imagined that we'd have a war in 21st century Europe between Ukraine and Russia. The key to surviving uncertainty has always been ability to adapt. Adapt to the changes of nature, changes of society, and to the changes of economy. In today's world, we have many challenges that have an impact on the business environment. Challenges that make the future depend on today's business leaders' skills to adapt to these changes and to take an action. In my speech, I will focus on 2 of those challenges and why is it important to adapt to them. According to different studies and my own life experience, one of the key challenges is how leaders unite and motivate people from totally different generations equally. At the moment, you can find 5 different generations on the labor market. People who have been raised totally differently, who grew up in incomparable environments, and who have different expectations for work. For example, have you heard your parents talk about how they used to go to school? When my parents went to school, the teacher stood in front of the blackboard with a piece of chalk in one hand and a textbook in another, and the whole class was quietly listening. But when I started my studies, the lessons consisted of technology in as many aspects as possible. Making PowerPoint presentations using virtual learning materials, and often, instead of reading an actual textbook, we watched TED Talks. In addition, work is life for older generations. For example, my mother, as a representative of Generation X, has lived her entire life to stay loyal to one business as long as possible. But I, being from Generation Z, have changed jobs 5 times during the last 4 years, which is more than my mother during her whole life in total. And this is normal. In addition, work is life for her. The older generations aim for structure, direction, and working long hours isn't a problem for them as long as the goals are met. On the contrary, Gen Z is feeling the most happiest when they can feel flexible at work. They can choose their own working hours and working methods. So, in order to retain talents from all generations, leaders have a challenge to find a way to proficiently use everyone's strengths and meet everybody's expectations so that the businesses continue to grow. The second key challenge is how businesses adapt to climate change and energy crisis. The income of most businesses is dependent on electricity and technology. Have you ever thought, what would happen to today's businesses if the electricity would go off for 1 week? Can you name any business that could actually maintain their everyday outcome and workflow? I can't. For instance, I work from home, and just a couple of weeks ago, I experienced a 2-hour power cut. I couldn't send out any emails because the Wi-Fi didn't work. I couldn't call because my phone was dead, and in general, I could work for only an hour because my computer needed power supply. On top of that, I was freezing, I couldn't cook food, and the toilet didn't work. Everything seems to depend on electricity on these days. But in addition to talking about electricity itself, we also need to think about how all these technological inventions are made. For example, did you know that for producing 1 laptop, it is used 240 kilograms of fuel, 22 kilograms of chemicals, and 1,500 liters of water. At the same time, we have been warned about water shortage for decades. Did you know that unless the water usage was drastically reduced, the whole population would be affected by severe water shortage by the year 2040? Knowing that now, have you ever realized how much are we actually harming the nature just by doing our daily work? This means that the leaders of today's businesses have a challenge to minimize the ecological footprint so that our children and grandchildren and grand-grandchildren will have a place to live. Businesses must redefine success and shift to sustainable goals in order to scale positive impact on the world. So, this brings me to a conclusion. Change is inevitable. Adaptability is a must-be to assure our business's growth and sustainability. Also, we cannot expect these changes to happen themselves or to be solved themselves. We cannot expect the politicians and governments to solve those for us. We, as JCI leaders, have to have an impact. To train our young leaders how to build sustainable businesses that unite people and have an impact on the better and sustainable world. So, remember, as Dolly Parton has said, we cannot direct the wind, but we can adjust the sails. Thank you.